Welcome back, fellow friends and philosophers, to this Wild Isle author interview. Today I have with me artist and author RJ Scribbles, the Robert Garron himself. How are you doing, RJ?
I'm doing well. Considering, things have, I guess, been a little slow, and but I'm still working away on projects, whatever freelance I can find at the moment. Um, and that's pretty much it. I'm just, but so I'm besides like whatever art I do, it's like I've been spending a lot of times trying to spend more time like writing now as well. Um, and so of course it cuts into what was once my reading time, but so I'm trying to crank out as much as I can, try to fill up the Substack, with a lot of really short stories. But now it's like, I think, I do have a few more short stories in the works, but I think now is a time where I'm going to start, thinking about slightly longer tracks to see
Yeah.
see what we can drum up with.
Yeah, well, I know that your writing hasn't slowed down too much. For those of who are listening who don't know you, why don't you let them know who you are and what you do, what aspects have slowed down and what haven't. Yeah, so we'll start out with, I'll break that down for you. Um, who are you and what do you do? There we go.
Well, I'm Robert Garron and also RJ Garron, but I like, I have everybody call me RJ, at least in this writer's circle. And I work in animation and I'm mostly a storyboard artist. But unfortunately, for I'm going to say like going on 2 years now, there's been no work. And so I just been finding whatever kind of freelance or commissions I can. And even that's been slowing down a lot. And I've learned to like swallow my pride and, I'm actually thinking after June, I'm probably going to start looking for just a regular job for part-time work, and then spend the rest of the time, doing whatever I can from freelance and writing.
Yeah, so mainly in animation then. It's a I don't know if it's a rare. You tell me, is it a rare breed to find someone who both writes and is able to draw and or paint or the visual arts? Do you think that that's a rare skill? You know.
I don't know. Not really. It depends. I know that like what somebody like we know Agrippa, is a great artist as well as a great writer. There's I know a couple of people I know, you know, some people who are actually older than me that I know online. Some members of of our prayer group. They're one of them is writing a book as well. Actually, he's getting into like a lot of like more like he's actually writing a fantasy book. He's like in his 50s, and he's writing a fantasy book. Or actually, he wrote one, but I still think he's in the process of editing it, and I actually like to check it out. But he's all and I showed him my Substack too, but I haven't heard anything back from it. I guess he's just been really busy. He's been also struggling to find work as well. And
Yeah, it's tough for
yeah,
artists
but
out
like
there, man.
yeah, but I feel that like writing, I mean, I like both art and writing, but I think that I find, I wish I'd done it a lot earlier, but like I find that writing to be um ha- it's just there's a creative satisfaction to it, but there's also an intellectual satisfaction that you don't find especially in the field of animation. It's where because with writing it's just like it's like much more exploratory. It's you it's Even though it's not visual, you make it visual by by the kind of prose you write. It's and I try to get very descriptive of what I write about. As I try to draw, as I try to I kind of like merge the both concepts of both drawing and art and animation with the writing to varying degrees of success right now. Um, but it's slow. I think it's a unique combination in terms of conceptually, and it's very rare because most of the people you talk to, and in animation, a lot of them, not everybody, but a lot of them are like into the more are very generic. Like just if you talk about like something like science fiction, they always think of the first thing they go to, they gravitate towards. And this is the average person, Star Wars. And it's just like, okay, I'm thinking about like, I'm even I'm thinking about like, like Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, and like and Frank Herbert, and just the whole, Eric Russell and Tolkien and everything else. Oh yeah, of course Lovecraft, and but it's just like but so it's so I think like it's very hard. Even like here in California, it's like I don't know many people who are authors. Even like some of the author groups that I'm at, you kind of stick out like a sore thumb if they know who you are, if you know what I mean. And then there's not a lot of like real like hard science fiction type of people or kind of like some or bizarre kind of fantasies. It's more just like uh, but I'm just scraping the surface of that, so like maybe I'm jumping the gun. But it's especially like when we talk about philosophy at times, and I still have I have so much to read. I still have to read about that. I have to read histories. I have to start learning stuff again. All kinds of stuff. And I a lot of times when I do writing even a short story, I try to do a little bit of research on the subject matters in that. And it's just, but I mean, it's not enough to be like, you're just like this absolute pro at it, but it's like, I guess it's enough to get by in the story and kind of fake it till you make it.
Right.
But even then, it's just like, it makes you hunger for more. So you always have that intellectual thirst that, it's hard to find those kinds of people too. So it's, you know, especially in the LA area.
Yeah.
So,
Especially after the mass exodus and then the firestorm. RJ, there's a question I've been leading these interviews in with, and I do want to. I actually not just do want to. We will come back to the philosophical side and the intellectual depth. I think that's actually quite a point of interest for me. But I did want to ask a modified version of the initial question that I typically ask all my interviewees here. So what I've been asking everyone else is for their lead-off moment, what put you on, not like what you got you to write your first story. The lead-off
hmm,
is like what put you in the direction as far back as you could pick out that led to you becoming a writer. But for you, because we have these two sides, we have the artist, the animator, and we also have the author. Um, what I'm going to ask is what led you on nudged you on each path, or was that path a singular path with like multiple branches, or multiple, what would you say that call them, almost like roundabouts, right, where you can kind of
um,
ambulate between the two? And which one is primary, right? Was it like you got set off on the path of drawing and then the writing came out of that? Was it writing first and then the drawing came out of that? you know what was the beginning, what came first? And yeah, that's really what I want to know.
um, it's really strange. When I was really, really young, it kind of like, I kind of reciprocated between the two. But like but I was never good at any of it, and until later. But it's like I used to write when I was like a teenager. I would write like little stories, and the like I was always into science fiction. So like but like
Did
I
you
would
read as
write,
a
but it's
kid?
just not as much as I should have. I'll say that. But I did later get into like Kurt Vonnegut and Isaac Asimov and those guys, and a little bit of Larry Niven and
What set you on them?
um I was always into astronomy. I always loved astronomy. Of course, I grew up on, I mean, early Star Wars, like that's what, like when you're a kid, but now it's like obviously we know we've reached greener pastures, but like and then a lot of like this science fiction cartoons that were on at the time, and like and then but I always, I don't know, I just felt like that my mind was never centered on the where I was at. Like I was never like I was always I was always like a wanderer, and so and maybe like I should have really taken it a lot more seriously way back when, but like
By
but
wonder,
it's
do you
just like,
mean like daydreamer?
yeah, the daydreamer.
Mm.
I don't know. Some people would call it spectrum disorders. You know?
Yeah.
um,
So what did you
Not
used to
paying
daydream
attention.
about? Like, so
Um,
obviously you had this fascination with something interstellar, perhaps, or something in the stars within the heavens beyond the reach of our normal world, but in that more outward, the direction that science fiction typically reaches, right? As opposed to, let's say, someone who's diehard into fantasy, they kind of reach back into the history, into the past, into the deep archetypes, where science fiction reaches into the, potential future, that which may come to pass, that which is unknown, right? So, why was it explicitly more future reaching than it was backward fantasy historical reaching? And if it was, why that direction?
well, I often veered that way. Also another Transformers were another huge influence in my early years. But like, it was that, but it was also a lot of times like, oh no, daydream. It would just, or I would just be thinking about cartoons as well, as well. Just like, Looney Tunes or like Hanna-Barbera or something like that. I it's I know it's ridiculous. Like the thing is, I don't know. I just wondered. A lot of times, I would just if I had to describe it to somebody in like a single word, what went through my head at the time, I would just get down and dirty and just say liminal space. It's just like, okay, you fill in the blank because it's almost like it's almost just like I guess like cognitive noise in a lot of times. And it could be like,
Mhm.
related to, ADD or ADHD, however you want to frame it.
I mean, I'll frame it in a union fashion since that is my proclivity. So what you would say is that, when he would describe it as an intuitive person. I prefer the big five model of personality, and trait openness. And trait openness, particularly interest in aesthetics and interest in abstractions, is a kind of transformative personality property. What I mean by transformative, really, it is transformative, but that's not the word I was really looking for. I think I was looking for unstable. Unstable in
Mhm,
that it changes, it moves, it slides. Sometimes this is called lateral thinking. And so what you're
mhm,
describing to me is lots of lateral or connotative or associative thinking. And that attracts one to art because art necessarily is connotative. I mean, you could have like a literal picture of something, but we all realize that at some point
mhm,
it merely reproducing life in an image is, let's say, conquered and made obsolete by a camera. So there must be
mhm,
something else, right? You have to there must be something deeper and richer there that you get from the artist that you can't uh, merely reproduce. At least you couldn't merely reproduce until the advent of the algorithmic image. Uh,
mhm,
I have to call them language models, but I guess they are still large language models. But
mhm.
the point being there is what you're describing to me does sound like someone who is high in trait openness and is drawn in by associations. Now, did those associations draw you in at first to drawing or at first to writing?
You want to know something? I can't really place it. I'm going to say it's something that was, I think it was tangential. That they, I think it was something that it was because I've always like I guess you could say I've always been like had a creative mind, although not disciplined. I was always like very very undisciplined when I was really young, and so when things came to me, it was just all at once. And I would say there's no difference between like writing and drawing with me. And so it's just a lot of times there are artists that do writing, but it's more passive. It's just more like almost like maybe journaling or maybe just, talking about themselves or or just kind of self-insert kind of characters in the comics they do. Um, but like I don't know, like with me it was just more like everything was just one lump sum. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, it makes sense. Sounds like you were jumping back and forth right from the very beginning. So
Yeah.
I think you said you were doing your first stories in high school. I imagine you've been doing, let's say, your first drawings back then too. Were you drawing into a more cartoon art style at that time, back when you were first
Uh,
drawing and writing?
yeah, mostly yes. Yeah.
Why?
I mean, I was always into cartoons. I love it. I'm more gravitated towards, um, not in a furry sense, but like definitely like in a like I love the anthropomorphic like animal characters. Especially like when they what they used to do with classic Disney and a lot of the shorts, early shorts and like MGM cartoons, whether it's Tom and Jerry's, Tex Avery, all that. Um, and as well as like believe it or not and Transformers and some anime like but like yeah but I think that's but I was never I see none of it nothing make none of it really makes sense because it's just like you have like these I wouldn't say not ambiguities, these things that are just like that are this incompatible kind of things that attract me, like just like you have the cartoon animals, and then you have like science fiction on the other hand, and it's like, and then like years later, you just like all of a sudden, hey, wait, I draw characters for a living, I'm doing this, and it's like I read science fiction, why not combine them? And then I mean, I don't do that with everything, as you see, like I ended up doing a lot of dystopian stuff instead. It's,
Yeah. Well, that's because you live in California, my friend. Um,
well, modern
yeah.
times, they say a lot right now.
So I'd like to
Uh,
posit something here if I could, because I actually don't know. I think they're not quite contradictory. You mentioned you're bent toward writing and the draw toward particularly like animation and cartooning. So, for those who don't know, I've worked with RJ a little bit here and there, professionally, and I've had the opportunity to read a lot of his work. And RJ, one thing I've noticed with your writing is not all the time. Sometimes you will go full hard science fiction, in the traditional sense. Very pulpy, but it's still true blue science fiction. Other
mhm,
times, your style will shift, and some of the cartooning and some of the animation does come through your prose. It comes through your characters,
mhm.
um, uh, which actually I think is quite unique. I think it's something that, if oh, well, two things. Am I right in my observation that I do at times see that, let's say the cartooning and animation style come through even in the prose? And if I am correct on that, um, would you say that that is a particular stylistic flourish is the wrong word, almost like marker of authorial identity of yours? You think that's a fair characterization?
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you see that. Um, like, what would be like, what were some of the stories in particular that, because I'm asking you this though, I want to see, like, if we see eye to eye in this, like, what are some of the stories that stuck out that, that had that authorial kind of style?
The more harder science fiction style.
Oh, no, no, the one mixing like animation and
Mm.
prose.
There's a recent one, for those of you watching here. I'm on my end. You shouldn't be able to see this, but I'm pulling up Discord so I can find it.
Okay.
Where you had shared, where was it? Critiques and exchanges. What's the title? I'll bring it up. Boop. Moonspell, right? So
Yeah.
Moonspell. Um, so for those who haven't had a chance to read, it's on Substack. Is that right? Moonspell.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and they can find you at RJ Garron on Substack. Is that your Substack handle?
Actually, it's so funny. Like, let me see. I think the easiest way to get there would be
The
okay.
easiest way if you're
It's
on YouTube,
R
it's linked down below.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's rgaron.substack.com. Let me see. I could just put it in here too, just in case.
Yeah, it's okay,
And
but well, I've received it, so it'll go in the description when this goes live. But yeah, so
yeah.
for those of you who are watching right now, if you want to just pause and go and read Moonspell, you can for yourself, so you'll understand the context for the conversation. For those who don't quite
Mhm.
have the time to read, RJ, will you please give us a brief overview of Moonspell, like a very short synopsis before we discuss it stylistically?
Okay. Well, basically, this one archaeologist is like he discovers this statue and that he discovers and It only glows in he finds like this one day he just leaves it and there's a full moon out and it actually causes the statue to glow. And it was also based, believe it or not, it was based upon this a prompt from what's it called, the Fiction Dealer on Substack. And we if for like it was they're done for like these little micro fictions we do, sort of like Phantom Whispers, but this is another site, and they come up with various prompts per day. Sometimes I contribute, other times it's just like I'm too busy, but like I think like lately, the last couple of them I did, I decided to like turn it to like full blown stories. So on here, like instead of like contributing contributing like 90 words or 100 words, whatever they require, I'm like throwing in like 500 words, 1,000 words, and like here, read. And I think I angered them a little bit. So I think from now on, like when I do contribute, I'm just going to like give them to that what they're looking for, and then elaborate on that, because I think a lot of those short fiction pieces can be springboards for like much longer stories and much greater stories. But yeah, that's a but that's been a good group of people. But yeah, so I decided to. I think the prompt for this was called Moonglow, and basically it was just about this statue that glowed under the full moon, and but no other light could actually trigger that glowing effect. So what happened is that when it was under the moon for a long time, not only did it glow, but also um, you know yeah, well, if you keep reading that, basically that there's a way to unleash the statue itself, and then basically, but of course, when that happens, I'll just say it's just a one-way street for the conjurer.
Yeah, so we won't spoil anything. But the thing unleashed is a character along with the archaeologist. I'll say that much. And if we were to analyze the piece, it starts out very much like a kind of what I'd call like pulp science fiction, right? You've got the intellectual archaeologist. He's got this
Mhm,
artifact. By chance and by celestial forces, it reveals some perhaps interstellar, perhaps interdimensional, borderline magical, or certainly really
mhm,
magical for alien force, right? You have this cocktail of those things. So that's all very pulpy. Where the cartooning comes in are the characters and the levity. So there's a kind of unapologetic refusal to take oneself seriously, particularly by the force summoned, right? It speaks
mhm,
in a very comedic way. The transformation is compared to what modern readers especially would expect from science fiction, they might find it a bit absurd because if this
mhm,
was done in the pulp era, it wouldn't be so genre bending because the genres did not exist in the forms that we see them now.
mhm,
But it definitely pushes that boundary. And so, what I find is that the plot twist and the characters themselves, particularly their way of speaking, as you lean very heavily, I mean, anyone listening to you talking thus far would have noticed that actually your lexicon, is that the right word? It's jargon lexicon. Your mode of speaking
mhm,
has in it quite a bit of sometimes archaic, sometimes hyper specific diction that you do not hear all the time, right? You use the word tangential in reference to like tandem, meaning at the same
yeah,
time. There's
mhm,
reciprocating, right? Which
yeah,
usually people don't use the word reciprocating in that fashion unless you're talking about a reciprocating saw. So I've been paying very close attention and I've been actually quite impressed um, at that ability to naturally pull that type of prose out that maybe some others would call purple, but to be honest, I think is actually rather refreshing when everyone writes like a fourth grader. So
right.
yeah, that's my opinion anyway. They read like fourth graders too, but we find this cartooning style, and I guess the question that arises out of that, RJ, is what draws one to the animated form? What draws one to the cartoon? What draws one to the what is a cartoon? It's a kind of exaggerated art style so that it communicates its affects, its emotions through
Mm.
these big bombastic. It's sort of like if you go to watch like a stage play, it's the same
Mhm.
thing, right? Because
Yeah.
of the necessities of the medium. If you have a simple
Extreme
drawing,
vaudeville. Yeah.
yeah, if you have a simple drawing, you have to have the emotions shown over the top so that the person looking at it knows what they're looking at. Because you do some subtle motion of the eyes or mouth, you can't see that on a cartoon. And
Yeah.
in a similar fashion with the prose, we start to see that willingness to be over the top. It does almost come across in a similar way as to a stage play. Um, do you think that commonality is a fair is that a fair analysis of the what would be an analysis of the draw toward both cartooning and animation as well as we could call it pulpy purple, almost at times cartoon inspired prose? Is that the draw that um
Yeah. It's
yeah.
so they're extremes, like science fiction, like, or fantasy or cosmic horror, like, or it just I believe in just genre bending big time. I believe in, it's just you're right, not to not not to restrict yourself to parameters, but to broaden the horizons, but to build new worlds. And you can't do that with just like with one trick. Yeah, it's just to me sometimes when you force yourself into one genre, it doesn't. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's. I'm not saying it never works. Obviously, there's whole genres with great books and great authors, but it's like I just feel that when you keep restricting yourself like that, you're also limiting your ideas. There's because and I so I think there needs to be just I think there needs to be a serious creative expression of the artist, like some sort of like creative spasm that the authors, and I call them, I said artists too, but it's funny that that I think that a lot of people are missing out on when they're restricted. So so that's why it's just like, and I also think that because cartoons themselves, they're extreme, and and they are. They're visually extreme, but also visually appealing, and there's elegance to it. Same thing with science fiction. Science fiction is extreme. I mean, you're basically dealing with the future. You're dealing with strange technology, strange life forms. Just strange, strange forms of intelligence. Strange ways of thinking. And even fantasy too. It's just like you're dealing with cosmic magic, cosmic horrors. You're dealing with just, I mean, it's like, why not blend them? Why not combine them? Like even if it's a hard combination, like it's like you have this fantasy world fighting this this technological world, and it's just like who's gonna win? Like, well, which what kind of what power, what advantages, disadvantages do both sides have that can work with or against one another, or against their own intents. So so yeah, but it's just like I say, like, and then throw cartoons into that. I mean, my word, yeah. I mean, we barely scraped the surface. I should be doing more of this stuff actually, but it's just like I get so wrapped up in just so many different types of stories, so many different types of worlds. But it's like, but I think if you do that, if you but I think that if you do write like different sorts, like recently with you, like a couple of like about a month ago or 2 months ago, we did that session together about I think it was just um it was called omniscient what was the word? It was,
Oh,
we
it was
did the
objective.
soldier's light.
We did an objective, let's say, narration style. So it was, I think, third person. I think the tense was whatever we wanted. Omniscient objective, meaning that you're only, for those who don't know the difference between omniscient and objective, omniscient is the narrator has access to all information. So the narrator can comment on thoughts, anyone's thoughts, anywhere. It's not limited to a character perspective. And then objective means that the narrator is now being restricted from that omniscient position only to describe observable phenomena. So you can't
Mm,
jump into the mind of any characters, and you also we also could not make moral judgments. It just had to be describing what was happening.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, and that one, yeah, that was actually a really great exercise, but it's like that wasn't even science fiction at all. That wasn't even, that was just, a soldier story, um,
It
and it's
was
called A
good too.
Soldier's
I
Light.
was Yeah, I was impressed with what you came up with actually. That was one of your better pieces,
Oh, well, thank you.
from the constraints. Yeah, and it was interesting because that was one of your serious pieces too. There wasn't anything cartoony about that one. That was more
Mm,
hard nosed science fiction. Um,
yeah,
did you end up posting that anywhere
yeah, on Substack.
on Substack? And what was the title again? Do you have it on hand?
A Soldier's Light.
Soldier's Light. So that's another one, guys. Go pause the video right now. Go over to Substack and check out A Soldier's Light. We'll advertise for RJ all day today.
It's a very short story, so you'll get it done with it in a minute.
Yeah, but it was good. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to ask about what we brought up earlier about the intellectual depth and the. I guess we can start off where we left off. So you mentioned that for you, writing has a greater intellectual depth than does drawing by itself, right? So
Mm,
I guess my question is well, before I even ask a question, could you just elaborate on what you mean specifically about like what do you mean by intellectual depth, and why is it that writing for you has that greater depth as opposed to drawing and animation?
mm. I mean, this is not to put down, drawing at all. I mean, I love doing it, but, I I think I to me, I think that drawing itself will helps now. Just now, this is happening now. This is not like something that I thought about like way back when. I mean, this is a recent development. But I feel that drawings now, at least for me, have helped buttress my writing. It's more like they're they're like it's another like asset to as a to describe what I write about. It's become more like um, um I'd say it's an expression of of at least a component of my writing, whereas like my writing just kind of encompasses like a whole like greater universe. Whereas the drawings that I do are as a component that can be like that can be taken and plucked into that and plucked from the reality and put into that universe, and then mix it in with like realism with the realistic. We'll mix it in, with actual like just true evil, with true like villains, and and then throw in a few dystopians in here, and and uh, and so it's just it's a component. The drawings to me now is like a component of storytelling,
Okay, that makes
especially
sense
as
to me. Yeah, tell me if I've got this right. So what I'm hearing from you is that for you, particularly because you're drawn to this more cartoon art style, the drawing has that component to it. But when you dive into prose, it stretches stylistically in a sense, but then also in terms of content beyond that cartoon style. And so the cartoon style meets the, let's say, prose that can come from many different angles, from many more different inspirations, and that
mm,
allows you to make the cocktail there, the synthesis that blends genres, blends settings, blend character types and archetypes.
mm,
That alone with drawing, I mean, I suppose you could do it if you wanted to like take a Renaissance painting and put like a cartoon character as part of the scene or something, or maybe you could blend styles in that way, but it's not the same thing as embedding that cartoony style with maybe some visuals for the reader, along with a great depth of a story or a novel. Is that a good description of why there's more for you anyway, intellectual depth when it comes to um, your writing as opposed to your drawing?
yeah, it's just basically throwing the cartoons into like a world of concepts. high concept thinking. And what can we do to actually like push the through narrative? How can we push the cartoons or that just that animated approach to like even greater, more extreme levels? Besides listening to death and black metal, which I'm a huge fan of, but and that's helped my that's I listen to a lot of that when I write too, so it's sounds crazy, but yeah,
So
but oh sorry.
can I ask a question about that? So we got death and black metal. We have dystopians popping up quite often. Actually, I've read a lot of your work, and there's dystopian elements, sprinkled most places. The question that I have from that is, why do you think you're drawn toward dystopian fiction?
Well, I'm drawn towards it. It's not because it's like, oh, I love that genre. Because there are people that are just like, well, they don't explain it either, but they're like, but they're really happy-go-lucky about it. It's like, I happen to like my favorite, my type of fiction is dystopian, and it's, but they don't explain why, but you kind of knowing their personality, you kind of have, kind of, you kind of, yeah, you kind of know the reason, but like, I guess I won't go into that, but like, I think a lot of it's self-reflection with some of these people, but that's just neither here nor there. But I'm drawn to it only because that we're kind of plunged into it in this society. We don't It's like we don't have the freedoms like we used to. We don't have the choice like we used to, and things are not working like they used to. And we just and I'll keep it brief, but I just think the direction we're headed to is complete de-evolution, and it's and the only way to express that, especially when you can't control what's going on in the world, or you have extremely limited control and limited influence at best, it's like I end up just saying like, okay, well, if this is the this is a juggernaut that's nonstop, that its momentum is too great that you cannot it cannot impinge upon it in any way. That means, and we're heading off a cliff. Well, this is the kind of future that I'm envisioning, because it's like I'd love to be talking about science fiction like, yeah, futures. I'd love to see like human exploration of space. I'd love to see colonies on the moon, on Mars, and beyond. I'd love us to see us conquer space, and but it's like we're living in a world now. It's just I don't think we're going to see that. I don't mean to be just now I'm getting pessimistic, but like, I don't. I think we've trapped ourselves on this planet, and I think we're going to wipe each other out in like in a heartbeat. But like, I but there's no other way that I could tackle that without expressing it in stories and without expressing my anger. And I write dystopians not because it's just like it sounds cool. It's, I mean, I guess you could say, it's sort of like in a passive sense, but like it's absolutely like it terrifies me. It's not even a cautionary tale, because it's just like it's like how we've had plenty of those, and like people ignore it. But it's just like it's an expression. An expression of entrapment, and it's like the only way that I can express these fears, this anger that I have, and a lot of us have. It's just to tell these stories, and like, well, this is what you want, and this is what you're going to get.
The image that came to my mind, I don't know the name of it. It's a painting by Picasso. It's the one you've got the light bulb that I think is supposed to represent like a nuke. Um, is it
Mhm.
sort of like that where Picasso was uh, painting the anxiety and fear around pronouncing it right, nuclear annihilation, um, during, I think it must have been around roundabout the Cold War. I don't know when else that would have been done.
Yeah.
Is it like that? Like we've got all this going on, all this pent up tension, and there needs to be some form of release valve and expression to grapple with and to get on top of and to have some control over that pessimism.
Yeah, absolutely. I think uh, I, uh, uh, it is in a way a release valve. It also, I mean, a lot of times, like these expressions also incite me even more, and but at other times it's more like, okay, at least I got that idea down, you know. But it's like a lot of people, like when they read them, they're just like, stop bumming us out, you know. It's just like, you know, if people don't want to read downer material, and I'm just like, well, you know, it's like, well, I mean, it's kind of hard to avoid, you know, something that's, you know, that might be inevitable because, but like I don't know. I mean, I try to write about multiple kind of like scenarios, multiple genres in that regard, but multiple themes, and you know, it's just like you do have. You know, I'd love to do more. I hate to use the term space opera. You know, I don't like that term, but I'd love to do more stuff like that. But oftentimes, like it's just like we get drawn into this maelstrom of chaos, and I you know, it's there's as for me, there's no way other way to express it. But yeah, but yeah, it's just like a lot of bands, a lot of you know, a lot of artists have always like you know, just had a lot of, I guess you could say, like critiques of war in their material, and it's, you know, through the ages, and and it's just like a, you know, it's really no different.
Yeah, it sounds to me that in the same way that someone like Aldous Huxley, and he wrote Brave New World. It's only a book
Mhm.
of his that I've read, but that book, if you read it, it's different than the film. If you've seen the film was okay, but if you read the novel, the end will leave you with this kind of dark lividness.
Yeah.
And so it's a downer. But what's the point? Why? Well, that's like a warning, right? It's
Mhm.
to make you upset so that you pay attention and try to avoid that happening in the near future.
Mhm.
And you know, if you when you read Brave New World, you'll start to realize that we're well on that path already.
Yeah,
So that's not good.
1984.
Yeah, well, it's I think Aldous got more things right than George Orwell, actually, but George Orwell did get a lot right in terms of the imposition of the totalitarian state. And yeah, it's good to bring him up too, though, because the two big names that I'm familiar with when it comes to dystopian science fiction writing, well, it's famous sci-fi writers who wrote dystopian science fiction, and a lot of writers did that at the time. You know, maybe that was because there was like a Cold War again. Technology was accelerating at a rate that was scary, and we are starting to see the culmination of a bit of that now, right? Like, you know, things are getting automated. AI is going to be taking over large swathes of the market.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess that leads me to my next question, right? So it was bubbling in my mind for a while. You know, there are a lot of I think it'd be fair to describe them as political themes in your work. What impact do you hope your your work to have on the individual readers? And do you want your work, or do you hope that your work would have a larger impact over time, not just on an individual reader and his or her life, but on, let's say, the culture writ large, or perhaps even branching out into politics writ large, seeing as politics does come up quite a bit in your work?
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to like, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I would like to have like a cultural impact, but I mean, you know, obviously, you know, somebody like you know, in my shoes is probably not going to be able to like, I'm like screaming in we scream in a void in many ways, but like I would hope that like I would have at least affect individual readers that would hopefully with time trickle into the greater society. I you know, I think the ultimate goal is to try to bring some sort of enlightenment to the people. You know, some people call it the Promethean flame. You know, I like to say the light of Christ to people. Um, you know, you know, I intend to do more like Christian themed like science fiction and fantasy too in the future as well. But like you know, despite the music I listen to, but um, but yeah, I would hope that, you know, there's at least a movement an intellectual movement in our society, a greater intellectual movement in our society that can shift us away from just like I'm not against games, I'm not against so entertainment and whatnot, but it's just I think people should put less precedence on that, and I think like they should start reading more, they should start thinking more, they should start being able to critically think, uh, the think very critically, which most people don't, unfortunately. That's the thing too. If hypothetically I were to have children, but be that as it may, but if hypothetically if I had children, I would encourage them to read. I would if it came down to like drawing and the arts, I would try to still I would try to gear them towards like something that I wouldn't have thought of, like doing more math, more science, more stems. Um, if anything, so that just because I think that's going to be very important for the future. That's going to probably secure them as well as like expanding their minds. Um, but also, instead of, I probably would keep them away from most social media for the most part, and away from TV, and I would try to wean them on reading as early as possible, and not make the same mistakes I did.
Yeah, to talk about weaning on reading and expanding your borders. RJ, have you ever thought about doing comic books?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I did. As a matter of fact, the icon you have on screen right now, representing me. That's one of my characters, one of my lemur characters. I do like a little like I haven't done it in a while, but I've been trying to do like these one-page strips of these characters in like a gag, and that's and that, I mean that's just a small pittance of like when what I've been thinking, but I'd say like comics, yeah, I was thinking about that too, and I would like to do them, at least start out small like that. But I also, that's why I also like to draw the images for the shorts I put up on Substack and or in Phantom Whispers when that I'm actually trying to finish up a cover for that right now as well. But like yeah, but I'm trying to but I do want to use this. I find that like when you have illustrations coupled with your stories as well, it helps add to the atmosphere of the story. That's another thing too. Why I like including like drawings, because not only it's not just more like it's just like, oh, look at the pretty pictures. Okay, that's what's happening in the story. No, it's more like it's more like how could this picture like just add to the story itself? How could it add to the atmosphere, the mood? How could it transport you to the world of this story is in? And I think that's very important. I think that's one thing a lot of books tend to miss as well. No, again, it's not necessary, but at the same time, I feel that it's something that's important that I like to do, and I feel that that I guess some like would that would that would lend itself to graphic novels as well, but I feel that like that the pictures are there to augment the prose rather than the other way around. At least in this instance for now.
So you
But
define
I
yourself maybe being something more like a light novelist, where it's a novel, but then occasionally you'll throw in images to enhance the reading experience.
yes. Yep.
Yeah. Have you ever read any light novels? They typically have to be basically Japanese translated novels. I don't think there are too many light novelists here in the West, but have you ever read any of them?
I don't think like as that genre light novel like or I have not. I don't think so. Not that I can recall.
I've only looked at a couple myself. What I found was, I don't know if this is a problem with the translation because, again, these things are typically originally written in Japanese. There are things you can do in Japanese that are natural, that are unnatural in English. And then when you go to translate them, if you don't have a very skilled writer, so you have to be both a skilled, you know, uh, polymath and writer to pull that off, which there are very few of those, it doesn't come across as all that great in terms of the composition. For instance, I was a big fan of the anime for Spice and Wolf. I liked it a lot. I could watch it
Mm.
forever if it went on forever. And then I got the light novels because they kind of do go on forever. And I couldn't get through the first one because the prose was so bad. It spoiled the story for me. Yeah, that can happen. And that leads me to another question is, you know, I've noticed quite a bit that there is not very much attention to uh, there's not very much attention to prose in the particularly actually I should just say this writ large, right? So this is still true for trad pub. I don't know how many successful traditionally published books I pick up, and again they're written as if they actually probably are written for eighth graders, something like that, because you want to hit the largest possible demographic in terms of readers, sell as many books as possible. But I've for a while been trying to convince people that actually uh, there's no reason to surrender artful composition to academia. Like, I don't know
Mm.
why we would do this. It seems a mistake. And I know that your work, you're always you're one of the few authors I know who's always pushing the prose. When you're doing that, myself included, like sometimes things fall apart because you're dancing on the edge of what you're able to put together. Um, but I guess my question here is, do you are you saying do you see the same thing that I'm seeing in which there aren't that many people, artists, I should say writers, really, there aren't that many writers who give enough attention to the composition of their works, and they could benefit from doing so and trying to push themselves in that regard.
Well, in terms of modern authors, I haven't read as much of them. Like, but I would say there's, especially with modern with trad pub, I'm going to say that there's uh, I think to harken back to that one to a concept you talked about, regression to the means. Well, whereas basically like the opposite's purple's prose, but then you have regression to the means, which means like basically like just bare bones kind of like prose, just saying like Joe went to the store, he picked up a pack of bubble gum, he chewed the bubble gum. He made a bubble. It's like something. That's how a lot of how like a lot of the trad pub reads to me, or like, that's how I interpret it. Very 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 loosely, of course. But I think that that a lot of the modern literature, so-called modern literature, especially the commercial based material, is to me is lacking that punch of imagery. I think something which you do is very Marquise is very refreshing. I love your use of just like I love your I guess I see literary fantasy when I describe your works because it's you have very I- uh, uh you have very imaginative prose. You have very your use of it's just it's like you don't describe something as is. You always you've just there's a lot of symbology to it. There's a lot of imagery to it. You paint pictures with your writing, and so I think that's something that's missing in a lot of like the work today, especially mainstream, and a lot of so a lot of the work today, the authors that they're promoting are also seem to be this may just be me, this may just be my bias, but a lot of it seems almost like self-reflecting and kind of narcissistic. And I don't mean like okay, you're right, as a writer you tend to write about things that's one thing, but there just seems to be something more like there's a veneration of the self in a chunk of it. And I could be wrong about that, So, but and I think that like it doesn't, and I think there's a lot of self-indulgence that doesn't complement. the atmosphere of the story, or the I guess the intellectual potential it may have, or the artistic potential it has. But again, that's just my analysis. I,
Yeah, so what it sounds like you're saying there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a lot of work that does not, its goal is not to, let's say, further the craft of writing. Its goal is not to seek deep intellectual pursuits and ask difficult questions. Its goal seems to be the indulgence upon the author, a kind of psychological projection onto the work. This is typically
mhm.
called like power fantasies or wish
Yep.
fulfillment power fantasies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, and yeah, I guess in that kind of work, trying to push the prose in a way that I appreciate your compliments. I think you push it as well. We mentioned Agrippa. His name is Torin Fletcher. He actually did the
Mm,
artwork there behind me for my book covers. So check out
brilliant.
Torin Fletcher. He is particularly he's also on Substack, and his work, to be honest, I feel like he's passing me up. That's I have to say that extremely impressed with what he's able to put together with his prose. And but when someone's doing that, you're not doing that for the sake of self-indulgence. The reason why you're not doing it you can ask, because you could argue, well, just because you use fancy words, Marquise or RJ or and Torin or whoever else is writing, just because you're being flowery with these pictures you're painting, why does that mean it's not self-indulgent? Well, here's my
Mm,
argument. You can tell me what you think about it, RJ.
mm,
My argument would be that it takes so much effort. It's so difficult, and you're so likely to mess up and have to go back and revise and fix and pull open a thesaurus and then pull up a rhyming dictionary and pull up a regular dictionary
mhm,
to make sure you're not out of your league, which I do very often. In fact, by very
mhm.
often, I mean whenever I'm changing words at an individual level in any of my manuscripts, I usually look the word up in the dictionary just to be absolutely sure that I'm not getting out over my what's the phrase? Out over my skis there,
Mhm.
because it's very easy to do that when you're on the edge, when you're trying to pick the perfect word that has a perfect sound and evokes the uh, right image or the right sensory information in the reader. You don't do
And the
that for
iambic
yourself.
meter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the meter as
Uh,
well.
yeah, I've been finding that as the more I read through my material, when every time I feel like I'm stumbling, I have to go back and be like, "Hey, I thought I did this. I thought I fixed this. Then I fix it again. Then again. Then again." I want to make sure the prose flows. I want to make sure there's flow to everything, but also I want to say like I don't want to say like sometimes musicality could be the right word, but it really depends. Sometimes it ends up being that way, and I'm just like, okay, maybe maybe I'm going too far with it, but at the same time, it's more like, okay, how do we vary up these sentences so that so one thing, it doesn't sound like a flat, a dead person's flat line, or or, or it doesn't sound, or it just sounds like out of order. It's just like, okay, like how do you arrange the sentences so that it matches the exact tone of what they're what each paragraph is trying to say. It's like how can we make it sing, without without being lyrical. Um,
Yeah,
in
or even if you're
essence,
me
it's
at times being lyrical, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And look, when you're if you're doing this self-indulgently, you don't do that, and here's why: because you can just imagine it. You don't need all those details; they're already in your own head.
Mhm.
So you can skim on the reality that someone else has to read your work, and you could write
Yeah.
it, yeah, just for yourself. Um, a question emerged in my mind, RJ. So we just talked about the propensity that some people might have to be self-indulgent with their writing and to not focus on the craft and actually improving the skill and the art of writing.
Mhm.
Now, in regard to things like politics or like you mentioned religion as well, how do you straddle the line between exploring those subject matters thematically without it becoming uh, propagandistic. Right? By that I mean without beating the reader over the head with a predetermined belief and kind of shoving
Mhm.
that down the reader's throat because that's a very difficult line to dance upon.
I used to do that. You even scolded me for that, and after a while, after like several stories of doing that, and like being like, no, no, it's like I have to write this, I have to change the world, Afterwards, I'm just like, okay, you know what? You're absolutely right. Because I think I read a few pieces. I can't even recall them off the top of my head. That I was just that just garnered a very a very questionable reaction from me, and I realized like, okay, you know what? I think if we focus too much on the propaganda rather than like, the world's effect on the character, for instance, then it's we might as well be like writing like essays and eh, and so I would say that if to really kind of weave a message into a narrative without or into a story without without trying to again like lambast or bash somebody over the head with it. And it's just how it's like basically set it up so that how does this world like you world build off you come up with some you brainstorm notes on the type of world it is, and then okay it's like so then you you know and then what it is, you lay the character down on top of that world or within that world, and then focus on the character's reaction to elements inside that world. And it doesn't have to say like, oh, that happens to be such and such type of person who's imposing this kind of unjust law upon me. But it's more like, okay, what's his reaction? How is he? Like, how is like maybe how can he relate it to like to something in his past that didn't happen before, but it's happening now, and the change frightens him. How can we like use the imagery? And I end up using a lot of like very dark imagery when this happens. Um, and again, I used to just not too long ago I was I was the other way. I was just overly expository or expositional, and like and it didn't like and just reading it now is just like okay, I see what everybody meant. I see what you meant, and so yeah, but it's literally like that's why like I went back to short story there was this one like story that I wrote. It wasn't like a dystopian, but like a but the but I wrote like I think I was close to 100 pages, and then I kind of for now scrapped it or just shelved it because it's just like I had to judging by like how I was writing it, how it came out, I had to like focus on short stories, and I think like that focus on the really short stories has helped. It's kind of like been a disciplinary process for me, and so and yeah, I mean it's not and a lot of trials and tribulations with it, and I think that like that helped that helped refine the story how you kind of refine your messages without being too imposing, but instead using like a sense of atmosphere, how to use mood, how to tailor like the right like confection of words to be able to express the world they're in without being too literal.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say without being too literal because I know I saw the biggest point of transformation when we did that exercise together, right? So it was when you wrote A Soldier's Light. And the reason why we did that exercise actually was for the very reason you just brought up. That was I'm really glad to see that it helped you and it works because what you just described, and for those listening, this is actually rather important, particularly if you're writing fiction that has themes that are either political or ideological or religious or whatever, anything that has a kind of systematic and dogmatic structure to it.
Mhm.
If you don't want to write propaganda, you have to do what RJ just described. And what you just described to all of us is that you started focusing on the internal logic of the setting and the characters as they exist within that setting and letting go of the reins of control and allowing the setting and the characters to determine the progression of that would determine the progression of the plot, right?
Hmm.
Because what they choose to do, how they choose to react to things, then is decided by what makes sense, what will give it a proper answer to the question that is the conflict of the plot. And then on the other side of that, you have attention on the prose itself. You're more concerned, instead of being concerned with, am I battling the communists with my fiction, right? Like maybe you are, but you're not focused on that, right? Like you have faith in yourself that as you do the exploration of the production of the prose, the composition of the prose, I should say, that a true and good message will come out of that, or a useful warning, if it's in the case of some of the dystopian stuff, will come out of that faith in the process itself, and you devote yourself to the art rather than trying to produce um, an artifact. By artifact, I mean something artificial, right? Something
Hmm.
that's, well, propagandistic. So um, so it sounds like you're really, really, really spot on with that one. um,
Yeah.
so I'm glad that that exercise helped. Really, I am.
Yeah.
So
No.
we're closing up, or rounding about, or getting to, I don't know how to say this, the end of the interview. One last question before we go. Um, Now we can find you on Substack. Can readers expect to, find a published book from you anytime soon that we could purchase with our hard-earned money and fill your pockets?
I do contribute to a magazine right now called Phantom Whispers, and we're soon to be coming out with a third issue. Um, so I contributed two stories to that. I know you contributed to the second the second book, and we look forward to you in the future too. But like yeah, you can find me on Phantom Whispers. It's available on Amazon. If you want, like we could link it right now. Um, but yeah, it's I draw like all the pictures to it. The only one, I think all the illustrations I did except the one Agrippa did for your story. To
Yeah,
match to
Goblin.
match our covers. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
great. Oh man.
yeah.
Yeah.
Torrance work is always excellent.
Oh,
Yeah, I look forward to having him on the podcast. Little preview there, but yeah, go guys, go look up Phantom Whispers. There's a ton of RJ's stories are in there. There's a new one coming up, so you can get the first two issues. You could read my story too, Goblin, in the second issue. But go ahead, pick
yeah.
up both the first two so that you're ready, and you're familiar with the writers, because some of these are serials that are going. So if you miss the earlier ones, you'll miss part of the story, and you don't want to miss part of the story, do you? All right, RJ. This has been actually a great interview. You ended it really well with the transformation and of propaganda to true art and focusing on the process. Um, any messages, anything you want to leave readers off with, anything that you learned over the course of your writing and artistic career that you wish that you really would have known, or someone would have said to you way back at the beginning?
Um, uh, I just everything like that I've learned up to this point would probably be I would say if you well, when you guys start out writing a lot of time I would say the best approach to writing, at least in the very beginning, is to try to write out of your league. And by that, I mean like write things that are hard for you to describe, that you don't really know about, but it forces you to look things up and get feedback on, and forces you to perfect your theme as well as your craft, and it'll lead to like really helping build your I guess you could say your literary vocabulary. It'll help build like your knowledge, whether it's whatever subject matter you're talking about, even and then build and just also build like your critical thinking. Um, yeah, and I'd say right out like when you start right out of your league, right above you. So always, it's basically like don't try to uh, don't just don't like restrict yourself to simplicity, but always write. I would say this: write more, write bigger, write more pompous sometimes, and then then have somebody come and bash you in the head and to tone it down.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Right above yourself becomes a literary Ubermensch, and we'll see you next time. Thank you,
All
RJ.
right. All right. Thank you.